Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so that you can build it yourself. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Vinay Jayachand. He's the co-founder over at HummingbirdEV, and today we're going to talk about their product market fit journey. Vinay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Collin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. Before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by our Predictable Revenue Founder Coaching Program. Founders, let's be real. Scaling a company is hard. You're juggling product, revenue, hiring, and a million other decisions. But what if you had people that have been there and done that and made all the mistakes before? That's what we're here for. We're founders, helping founders find their first customers, build their first sales teams. If that sounds interesting, give me a call. Vinay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Collin. Excited to be here.
So, me too, man. Me too. I want to talk about, I don't have many EV companies on here. Obviously, Elon, probably isn't coming on a show like this. And I'm, as we kind of talked about in the pre-interview, EVs, anything with like hardware is just cool. And I think specifically, if you look at the emissions, the actual percentage of emissions that come from cars is not massive when you compare it to the percentage that comes from vehicles that are not, I'd say, off-road diesel, right? And at least in Canada, we have various different tiers of off-road, and there are various different regulations. And so I think the off-road or consumer transportation EVs are extremely interesting to me. And so I'm really excited to have you on to learn a little bit more about Hummingbird and where the idea came from. And I'd love to start there because you have to be and I mean this in the nicest possible way, some certain brand of insane to think, I'm going to start an electric car company.
Oh yeah,
talk to me about that because I love it.
I mean, I come from the world of diesel engines as well. So prior to even Hummingbird, I worked with companies like Cummins and Kenworth, and I never even expected that a battery could actually drive four wheels, right? Whether it's a car or a commercial vehicle. So the idea stemmed from the fact that, me and my co-founder, we worked at this company called EVI, and we had deployed about 100 to 110 vehicles for UPS in the Valley in California. And the project was successful from a data standpoint. We were able to accumulate enough data that from an operational perspective, EVs could be that future where it reduces the overall overhead for customers from an operational standpoint. But of course, from a CapEx standpoint, investing 10 times the cost of what a diesel vehicle would ideally be was the main challenging point, right? So cost was the limiting factor for customer adoption. And of course, anytime you're bringing in a new change, it's not going to be well received by the end customer right away. So we were navigating through those bottlenecks. We were navigating through those limitations. We were getting a lot of feedback from customers. Simple things like just regeneration on the electric vehicle. In the consumer world, it works fine. It's very, very well acceptable. Sometimes, the drivers and operators just don't like it initially, right? So, but that can significantly help the fleet manager reduce costs from an efficiency standpoint, right? So simple implementation, simple deployments could have a negative sentiment, but at the same time, it's trying to provide that additional incentive to that end customer in terms of other parameters, like in terms of the drive experience or in terms of the lower maintenance that EVs bring in to at least the commercial vehicle standpoint, where you don't have those oil changes, you don't have those regular maintenance as compared to diesel. But suddenly in your bill of materials, instead of managing 5,000 mechanical parts, dealing with 600 chips. So that's what got us thinking that if we cannot vertically integrate, because the control of the vehicle is very distributed in an EV as compared to a diesel. Where if you look at diesel, it's more centralized around the engine. All the other systems are running off the engine. But here, suddenly between batteries, motors, power electronics, a lot of, the technology is sort of distributed and not one supplier is giving you an integrated turnkey solution, right? So that is that is the intent with which we started Hummingbird in around late 2015. The main two goals were, how can I make sure that I'm not changing the experience for the driver or just making it better, which could
Hmm.
mean not only in terms of drive experience, like just payload, right? The moment you start adding batteries, it's increased payload. So how can I provide that same experience as they would feel owning a diesel or even better? And the second was, how can I reduce the cost, right? That's the only way we were going to increase the adoption. Yeah, that's where the journey of Hummingbird started. We were not only looking from an emission standpoint, we were looking also from an efficiency standpoint on how can we control the overall efficiency of making sure that the customer is getting maximum incentive or maximum return on investment for every dollar that is spent on that vehicle, whether it's the battery
Hmm.
system or the power systems.
Mm. It's a big investment, but it's not like we're talking to, small companies here. We're talking
Yeah.
to fairly large mining companies, government organizations, the kind of folks that can make a large investment,
Yeah.
long-term investment like that.
Oh, yes. I think that early adoption needs to be spearheaded or pioneered by somebody who has that capacity. Like you rightly
Hmm.
mentioned, that's where a lot of our deployments have been supported by the state in some manner or some government bodies, depending on the region
Hmm.
that we've deployed our technology. And yeah, I think the larger corporations are probably much more equipped from an end-to-end mobility standpoint as well. Because a
Hmm.
lot of the times, the customer is absolutely fine to transition to an EV. But the moment they start looking at how this EV is going to operate in their use case and with all the overheads in terms of charging infrastructure, even if they have to get a new driver, just the management of that whole EV could be quite cumbersome if they adopt it and use it in their application, right? So I think when they start looking at that whole 9 yard from an end-to-end mobility perspective is where they get a bit nervous. But that's been the main area where we had to play that convincing act. Not
Hmm.
so much because the customer is willing to pay that premium for an EV, especially with the rise in diesel prices, right? So gas prices. So
Hmm.
they see that ROI naturally when it comes to just EV as an asset. But in order to operate that EV is where, there isn't much data, there is that hesitation because, it's not like proven globally across multiple markets and use cases.
I'm curious, how do you go from, okay, hey guys, let's build a car or like
Yeah.
a truck to actually building a truck? And like, what type of validation did you do from like, okay, or did you go out and just start building? You guys all have infinite money. And you're like, well, we'll build just a couple thousand of them and see what happens. Or did you, go through a validation process? Were you able to find like somebody to help lead the way with
Yeah.
you?
Oh, yeah. No, I think in our case, things have been a little more organic in the way that we've, grown from prototype to production. A lot of our first articles were generic builds where we
Hmm.
wanted to, our initial goal was not just be like a solution provider, but help OEMs integrate our powertrain solution.
Hmm.
And at the same time, we had certain areas and sectors where we were deploying vehicles ourselves. Like, for example, in the mining vehicle space, we were more like a powertrain supplier,
Hmm.
where we were also helping the OEM integrate our powertrain into their chassis application. And on the other side, there were certain applications like agriculture segment and logistics segment where we were deploying vehicles using Hummingbird brand. So the natural goal for us was to build something very modular and generic so it can adapt to different use cases. So can I build something like, you go to Chipotle, you can mix and match so many different
Hmm.
ingredients, but still you can make that final product that, suits a variety of needs from different customers. I think that sort of was the mindset, right? Can I do something like Lego block
Hmm.
where, can I create, so we just started off by creating like a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack system where we said,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to be dependent on the supplier only from the cell perspective because I can't get into that supply chain. But in order to realize an entire battery pack and to basically make sure that it would absolutely work in an EV application was the challenging
Hmm.
part. So whether it was building battery pack systems, we also built, traction inverter and a lot of power electronics
Hmm.
that go onto the vehicle. And again, we wanted to keep it very modular. Can I meet application use cases between a light truck, a medium duty truck, as well as a heavy truck, right? So how can I
Hmm.
plug and play different modular systems in order to realize that final product? So I'm also trying to utilize commonality of parts, so that reduces my cost within the
Hmm.
companies. That was sort of the goal and mindset at the prototype level when we were envisioning how that
Hmm.
final product needs to be built. But scaling from prototype to production is an extremely challenging and steep path to take.
I'm curious, how many, where did you get in the prototyping process before you had your first potential customer? Like, what did you interview a bunch of people? Did you have some folks in your network that were just dying to buy some cars or trucks? Like, what
Yeah.
did that look like?
I think it came more from how we see the market grew. And because we were part of the industry in the commercial vehicle world, and we understood, where the gaps were in terms of what an OEM would need and how the customer is actually reacting to these EV deployments. Somewhere, for example, the drive cycles in an EV is so intense in terms of how the torque varies between whether the truck is driving within a city versus driving on a freeway. So
Hmm.
the amount of the intensity that it creates for the battery pack is quite critical. And at that point of time, there weren't many players who were really building batteries for a transportation application, right? It was mostly energy storage, or
Hmm.
low voltage batteries. It was like backup power. uh,
Yeah.
so we knew
Hmm.
that there wasn't anybody doing it at that point of time, at least not many for the commercial vehicle side, and at least not in the US. There were a lot of other players in China at that point of time. But I thought if we can provide a very curated or a tailored solution, which sort of fits the application use case,
Hmm.
and we prove that with data, then I think we had the right product market fit.
Cool. Where did Talk to me about where your first customer came from?
Yeah, so our first customer, so when me and Rakesh were winding up things at EVI and trying to move to starting a new company, Hummingbird, we had done one final project at EVI. It was just like an R&D project for one of the mining vehicle companies in China, where they were looking at some sort of a retrofit solution, and they just wanted like a proof of concept. And so we did this more out of an interest from our end, because at that point of time EVI was almost like winding down, and there was only this one project that was lingering around. And we thought that if we can at least understand how batteries could work in some very niche use case like a mining vehicle, it would be interesting just for us personally. But we built that vehicle with the intent that it should be a nice, functional, operational, and safe vehicle, though the customer did not really intend that as a deliverable, right? So they just wanted a proof of concept, but we built them almost like a prototype or a pilot vehicle, you could say, because we had that background and experience of building, integrating powertrains, at least on chassis applications. So when they saw EVI wind down, it was very natural for them to just come up to us and ask us, hey, would you guys be interested to take up something, or continue from where you guys left off? We want to
Hmm.
build 10 more vehicles, and we want to see how they perform in our application. And we were damn excited because we had just started the company, and that was like a huge boost for us to onboard a customer right
Hmm.
when we started within few months of company's operation. So yeah, I mean that gave a really good boost. We were rolling from there. So what we had conceptualized as products that we would build ended up actually with that customer utilizing it on their vehicles. So we started off with something which is very we were just doing like vehicle software just to start with that customer. So we did not want to disturb much of their operations. And then slowly we started to transition their diesel systems with our battery electric. And that journey took almost about 2 to 3 years. And after that, till date, they have more than about 700 vehicles in their operations. So it was quite a journey.
Wow, that is quite the journey. I'm curious, were there any surprises along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at every instant, it was challenging. It was surprise one after the other. I mean, a lot of the time when you're venturing into a newer application area which is not familiar to you, at least the off-highway segment. Though
Hmm.
at Cummins I had some experience on the off-highway segment. We did not know anything about the use case. And because it was in China, we did not even have that liberty where we could go into the mine, understand what really was happening, because a lot of it was owned by the state. So the most challenging part was we did not know the use case. And so a lot of the times they would just say, okay, it needs to be explosion proof, but we did not know much of what that standards really meant. We designed the first battery pack. We built it very similar to how we would do it here. But since it was a prototype, it was okay, but nothing complied to their regulations. So it almost took us about a year and a half of just engineering effort to adapt our product to a lot of the explosion proof standards. So they define it in terms of MA standards in China, but it was a huge learning curve. What that did though is it really allowed us to create some extremely robust, reliable product lines within the company, because suddenly you're taking care of so many different failure modes that ideally you wouldn't want to do that and spend that much
Hmm.
amount of effort for certain use cases which is not really required, right? So but it allowed the
Totally.
company to build something which is more robust and reliable.
Your Google search history from that time period must have got you on a lot of government watch lists.
It did, but since we were a bit small at that point of time,
Yeah,
I don't think there were too many of those, but certainly maybe in the current situation, yeah. But we did try
maybe.
to. I remember when we wanted to do all the licensing agreement and everything, we did look at all the ITAR regulations and everything. We
Hmm.
complied to everything from a legal perspective. Yeah, that again
Okay.
was challenging because we, as founders, we didn't know much about it at all.
I mean, who goes into a situation like that knowing everything? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
we're all in the dark here, just trying to slowly figure it out one step at a time.
True. Sometimes you're
So,
just so excited with just getting that customer, you know, all these other, you're blindsided with all the other, possible
mhm.
issues that could come up.
So your first customers came from EVI.
Yeah.
Talk to me about where your next customers came from. Was it just those 10 and then done, or what happened next?
Yeah. So something that we were able to scale, of course, with the mining vehicle customer, it was like our anchor customer. It allowed us to build a lot of product line within the company, irrespective of whether we were deploying it in the mines or not. So the next customer for us was in the North America. It was Moonlight Farms. So Moonlight was basically deploying a net zero solution for their farms. So they already had like a 2 megawatt solar. They were trying to do something with hydrogen, I think, at that point of time, just for power generation. But they wanted the entire fleet to be electric. And this was more in terms of us reaching out because we had created some sales channel within the company where we were looking at other possible potential markets that we could capture. The reason being that we had proven ourselves quite a bit by 2019 timeframe, where we were pretty well established with certain product lines for the mining industry. And we were like, which is the best pivot for us at that point of time? And we felt like the ag side was completely untapped, as well as it was getting regulated. We started off with just electrifying tractors for Moonlight Farms. So we deployed about 10 tractors for them. Some of them were used for pulling fruit, some for cutting grass, and they had sprinklers and sprayers and other implements that were tied to this system. It was more about Moonlight also trying to understand whether electrification of tractors would really fit into their ecosystem. So it was more of validation. With the intent of validation is why we built those vehicles. But with that, they got more and more confidence with our powertrain system, and then we started to do variety of other vehicles. We did refrigerated trucks. We were actually one of the first guys which actually did refrigerated trucks in California. So it was completely zero emission. You know, your truck is zero emission as well as your refrigeration system was zero emission. And CEC and CARB and other bodies were, heavily trying to regulate the refrigeration market to drive towards zero emission, because there was a lot of justification for emissions, because when your truck is idling and your refrigeration system is running off fossil fuels, it's high pollution in populated areas, especially near stores. There was we knew that we had sort of. I think it took about 6 to 9 months. It was not like, we just went to the farm and, they said, okay. It was 6 to 9 months of constant effort, but we tried to piggyback a lot of what we had already done in China and try to justify that as a good use case for what it could mean for the ag side, because it was similar in terms of off-highway segment, but the variety and the range of vehicles that they had was the challenging part. Like, they had anywhere from Class 6, Class 8 tractors, but that's where it sort of aligned with the company goals, because we were trying to build modular systems. And for us, this was like the perfect time to prove that, being modular and being adaptable, especially also controlling the powertrain from a software side, allows you to roll out, your product lines in different applications in a much quicker time. So in about 2 years, we were electrifying anywhere between 25 vehicles for them, between tractors, Class 8 refrigerated trucks. Then that was the first time we actually built a mobile fueler, in terms of like a mobile charging station for EVs.
Interesting.
So this was it came out of a need. The farms are too huge, right? And after these operators take these tractors, out in the field, at the end of the day, they leave it where they are. They don't return back to the barn. And then usually you have a truck, and this guy has gallons of fuel loaded up, and he goes and fuels these tractors. Now, we wanted to replicate something similar, because we had to close that end-to-end mobility chain for the customer in order to sell our vehicles, right? You had to go that extra mile. You can't just give a vehicle and walk off at that point of time. So we built another vehicle. Of course, the customer was willing and on board with this solution, where we integrated, think of it like a DC charging station on board the vehicle,
Yeah.
right? So this, our power systems were bidirectional, so they could drive the vehicles as well as they could export the battery from the power from the battery. So we built a Class 6 truck with about 200 kilowatt hour of battery packs, and the only goal of that truck was to go charge these tractors. That was a significant milestone for us in order to prove that, EV could actually be utilized, especially a commercial EV could be utilized other than just transporting goods and people from point A to point B. You can actually incentivize the customer with the battery as an asset to export power to the grid or export power to other vehicles.
It's so interesting how all of the pieces come together.
Yeah.
In a previous life, I worked for a company that sold diesel generators, but more as a tri-power system. And it was battery, wind, solar, and diesel all kind of working to keep a battery charged for these remote LiDAR applications, basically measuring wind in remote for potential wind farms. But it all had to keep this battery charged to a certain level. And I'm like, as you're explaining this, I'm like, oh, we kind of built a diesel, a truck. We just didn't put wheels on it and like a motor. Like we had all of this infrastructure. We could have just, I mean, obviously silly to have a wind powered diesel truck.
Yeah.
But yeah, really interesting, the fascinating engineering that all goes into it.
True.
This has got to be one of those projects that is just never ending. There's always so many things that you could just be fine tuning, that you could be building, that you could kind of push up the stack, push down the stack.